of Chitties and Chettiar, and had discussion with quite a lot of things about your community as well, in terms of the names and the origins. You also heard of what is going on in Singapore. You heard a little bit about the history, and I think you've also heard about the aspirations or the expectations of your younger generation for the future. And this morning you heard about legacy and how you can preserve your legacy and move on into the future. So when I looked at this program, I was wondering, what am I supposed to speak? Because everything is covered over here. So I called Vanilla and said, Vanilla, what do I speak? She said, anything you want, lah, also can. So I really have a problem in this situation. What really do I speak? So I sat and thought about it, and then I said, if everyone has spoken about themselves, what about someone from outside telling you or giving our viewpoint about you? And so the question then is, the view from the outside, yeah? And you know everything about yourselves, but do you know what other people think about you? And I think that's very important, because just this morning, one lady said, don't get ideas from inside the community or inside your committee. Get ideas from outside the community, and I say get some ideas and opinions from outside your community as well, to find out about yourself, because that can really help you in the long run and in the distant future. So, do Malaysians know about your identity? Do they know the meaning of Melaka Chitty? Right? I'll answer the questions myself. Do the Malaysians know about your community as such, the Melaka Chitty community? Do they know about the rich history that you have, where you originated from and how important you all were in the past? Do they know about your culture? I'll comment on each of these. And do they know about your colorful festivals and your ceremonies? Well, let me be honest, because one thing I noticed in the discussion this morning is it was a very open discussion. You were all speaking very frankly about your problems of one to another. Now that's a good start, because if you bring it out and express it, and the other people also discuss their problems with one another, then I think that goes a long way in solving problems. Looking at it, then you must look forward to solve a problem and not create divisions within your community. Look, this happens in a lot of communities. I'm a Sri Lankan Tamil. It's just as difficult over there as well. It's a larger community, there are pockets and also difficulties, but generally the people get along and move along somehow, okay? So I think this is possible in all communities. So do Malaysians know their identity? Let me tell you, very, very few, right? How do I know about the Chitties? Because when I was studying accountancy a long time ago, there was this guy in our class. He looked like an Indian, he looked like a Malay, which is my favorite phrase, you know? You look like Indians, you look like Malays. And when you asked him his name, he had a typical Tamil name. But he spoke Malay, you know? He didn't speak Indian. And when I asked him who you are, where you're from, he said, oh, I'm from this group called the Melaka Chitties. Now, we know the history of Melaka and how the Indians were, but I never actually met a person who is a descendant of that community. Subsequently, I met more people and I had an understanding of that. When I asked somebody else, do you know about the Melaka Chitties? They say, I heard about this group of Indians in Melaka, they only speak Malay, you know? They can't speak Tamil. I said, well, that's close enough also. So that is the extent of how they know your community itself. Do they know your rich history? Do you know your rich history? Right? Maybe not. So I will go through a little bit about that also. And do they know about your culture, your colorful festivals and ceremonies? 2 years ago, when we were doing some work with you all, we came to know about these festivals, and for me, the Mangame was one of the most colorful and very nice ceremonies and very, very devotional ceremony of the Chitty community to everybody. But the people in Melaka, do they really know what is going on? Because it was only the Chitty community, the people around here between the Vinayaka temple and Melaka that seemed to be involved. The rest of Melaka town was going about the business like nothing else, you know. Unlike in many other places, Taipusam, everything, everybody is involved in Taipusam. But here is a small group. And best of all, we were using the balcony of a hotel in front of the Vinayaka temple to watch and to take pictures. And the tourists over there, we asked them, do you know what's going on? They didn't know what's going on. Right? They've been staying there for a few weeks. There was a French chap, but he didn't know this ceremony was going to take place, and when it took place, he didn't know what it was all about. So he joined us, he came in and he followed us and he tried to study that history as well. So this is very important. So if you, the schools, what do they teach you in history? Yeah? they teach you about the history of the country. Now the history of the country has got many, many phases, going back all the way for 1,500 years, we've now discovered from Bujang Valley and so on and so on and so forth, all the way through the very important part of the Melaka Sultanate. Right? Our history in this country, I would say, starts from the Melaka Sultanate and continues right up to now. Previously, it was Bujang Valley, it died out. Then another culture, it died out. 2, 3 other cultures around, died out. But from the Sultanate of Melaka, it was continuous till today. They tell you about the Babas and Nyonyas. You learn that in school. You start about Angipo, and you start about Baba and Nyonya, you talk about their culture, and everybody knows Baba and Nyonya. Who is a Peranakan? Baba and Nyonya, the Chinese. Do they talk about you? They don't know about you because nobody has taught them about you, right? So that's very important. And many of us happen to have friends who are Chitties, like I explained to myself. And when we started to get to know about the Chitties, we came to know there was so much more to just the person being a Chitty. So much more to their culture, the ceremonies, the festivals, of course the dressing, and equally important the food as well. So that is the extent of the knowledge of the people about the Chitty community. So what can we do about that? We will come to know that later. So let me go on to a little bit to a different way and start from a different angle of why the Chitties came to Melaka in the first place, what made them stay on, what is it that they traded on that made them well-to-do and important, and how they were the intermediaries, the link between the East trade and the Western trade in Europe, India and Europe. Right? Now, you'll be very surprised, and I'll put it to you in a rather stylish fashion. Right? They came as traders, and they were very successful traders. And they had a very powerful influence in the royal court. Did you know that? Did you really know that they were very influential in the court of Melaka and the Sultanate of Melaka? You knew. You have to, because outside your village there's a big plaque written by the government that says that you're very influential in the Sultanate of Melaka. Right? History books indicate that also, although they use a different name. Now how do we also know this? From other people writing during that time. And the Portuguese Chitties have been mentioned in many writings. Tom Pires was a Portuguese writer who arrived just after the conquest of Melaka by the Portuguese, and he wrote about the Chitty community at the time. Heredia, Manyo Perindo Heredia, he was around 1670, a little bit later, 1570, sorry, a little bit later, but he was a Eurasian and very involved in the history of Melaka, and he also mentions about the Melaka Chitty community. And the Dutch, of course, there is also mentioned by the Dutch of the Portuguese, of the Chitty community as well. Now let's see what I'm going to say. Who said this? This was said by the writer I mentioned earlier, Tom Pires. Whoever is the Lord of Melaka shall have his hands on the throne of Venice. Meaning to say that Melaka was such an important port. If you control Melaka, you control the trade in Europe which goes through Venice. Now who is he talking about? Who is he talking about? Let's have a look. This is what I say. Why did he say this? Right? It's because of the Chitty merchants. In those days they called them klings. The kling merchants is written in Tom Pires, in the Malay annals, and by the other Portuguese writers, Father Quintando, written by the Portuguese documents of the past, calling themselves klings or shillings. They were the traders. And the Chitty community is a descendant of those traders. Are you not? Yeah. You know that you are the descendant of the traders of Melaka. Yeah. Right? Your ancestors, in fact. So, what have they said? Simple. You can read for yourself. They were the great kling merchants who trade on a large scale and come in many junks. And this is a nation which brings the most honor to Melaka, the klings. Right? And somebody else said, these klings have all the merchandise, they got all kinds of products and even more than all kinds of products. And they trade more than any other nation in this country. Now this may sound fantastic to you, but when you look back on the history of Melaka 600 years ago, you'll understand that other people say this, there is something. This is the background of the Chitty community. Yeah? So that's something very important to know. Now if you talk about Melaka, it's luck. It could have been anywhere along the west coast. Parameswara came and he happened to settle down in there. And it settled on this spot, because it was also the Straits of Malacca, protected from heavy weather. The seas were calmer than most other places. It was also close to Sumatra, which was, of course, in those days, a major trading port through Palembang. And it was also the maritime route. All the ships that passed by passed through the Straits of Malacca. It was a sheltered port. It was a good capture point. So it was good luck that it was Malacca. It could have been anywhere else. It could have been Teluk Intan, which is also on the coast. Maybe you could have landed in Penang in those days. And I think the story will still be the same. Alright, you would have created something, made it a trading port, you would have still come here as traders, and the establishment would be a different place. So what about during the Sultanate? Let's talk about that. So they arrived during the days of the Sultanate, and as traders, and they are also known, as I said before, in the Sejarah Melayu, or the Malay annals. Now, every trader who comes in those days had to follow the monsoon winds, so they stayed here for 6 months before they could go back. Now, some of them, of course, didn't go back. They left behind someone to act as trading agents so that they could still continue taking orders and trading with remaining stock. And some others went back. And ultimately, there were people who remained in here. And for 6-7 months, it was only natural they formed a family here by marrying people from Melaka itself. The children were looked after their mothers because the fathers were busy at work or back to India. It's also common in old Asian cultures that the mother is the one who is looking after the household. So they began to speak Malay and follow a tradition of Malay. The dressing was Malay because the local people, ladies were Malay, or maybe of other races from this area. Could be Javanese, could be Bataks, could be anywhere else. And this created your community of Chitties. So what is Chitti? Chitti comes from the word Shresti, which means a trader. Last week you heard Shamalan Teva, I think. You all were here to talk about this. And he says exactly that it comes from an Indian word Shresti, and then it came down to become Chitti here. So he has written he has spoken quite well on this. And he also mentioned something else which is very possible, where he says that it wasn't just the trader, the Chetti who came, but he also brought along other people of other castes so that they can provide the services for him. That's possible also. We can't say this because there's no written record. What I also think is that when they came first and established a community here, they needed farmers, they needed goldsmiths, they needed the priests, and slowly brought the other groups along here. So that is how you have all the other different castes in this country. Right? So that's another possibility. Again, as I said, it's very interesting because nothing is in writing. We know this from generations of people speaking, we know this from written records from other people. Right? How they came and how they lived together. So basically, Coromandel traders from India, Arabia, and so on. India, that's the important part. Alright, Coromandel, east coast of India. Sorry, this map is not very clear because the copy I got itself is not very clear. But it comes from Professor Nordin Hussein's book, right? And so they, of course, traded on all these, anything that they traded. But I think one of the most important products was spices and textiles, one way to the other. Textiles would have come from India to go on, locally used, on into China and Japan, and the spices would come in from the eastern islands of Indonesia into Malacca, and from there they take them on into India, and from India they go through Arabia and into Venice. Not directly to Europe, but to Venice. Venice, the merchants of Venice were the traders of Europe. They imported everything, and from there they passed them on to the rest of Europe. This is why the earlier statement is, you have the hands on the throat of Venice, right? Not of Europe. So products, I mean, we can go into a big discussion on the whole trade and this, but that is not our place over here now. All right? Now, what happened during the Portuguese times? The Portuguese have written, as I told you, they call them shillings, or they call them killings. In fact, it is not shillings really. In the Portuguese way, it's killings. So they spell it like that, right? So it's killings. And they again had all the merchandise and more. And the trade was under control of the Portuguese this time. Earlier, the traders had the full control, right? And of course, they paid their dues to the sultans. But the Portuguese said, now we are in charge, we control the trade ourselves. But you can carry on business as you are. And many of them did. And there was Aina Chatu, one of the most famous Chitties of the old days. He continued into business. He was the head of the community and later made a Bandahara for a short period of time until unfortunately his life changed quite a bit. right? And the Bendahara was not such a strong position. It was a little bit less than the earlier Bendahara, but still an important position, focusing on the traders and the trade within the place itself. Now here you see some pictures again. I'm sorry, it's not very clear. When you talk about this first picture here, although it is the Portuguese conquest of Malacca, it tells you in this painting what Malacca would have looked like at that point of time. Alright? And this is the map of old Malacca, a very common map you see everywhere. Then during the Dutch times, then Chitties had a different turn because the Dutch had a different way of doing trade. They had a monopoly of trade. They decide how the trade is to be done. Everything must be sold to the Dutch, and from the Dutch they sell to other people. And they buy things at very, very low prices. Everywhere where the Dutch were, this was a system they used, and the local community actually suffered in many cases, including the tin industry of the early days on the west coast of the Malay Peninsula. And then they had to move into other kinds of businesses, and then the other castes started to become very important because they knew skills. They were farmers, they were goldsmiths, they took to bricklaying, and others had to join them as well into these professions as such. And they also, the community moved out into Gajah Berang, including places like Trankara and Pachang. So this sort of brought about the end of a full trade influence of the Chitty community itself. They didn't die out because there is a written evidence that there were people who still continued trade, not the big trade that they were had to India and so on, but within the region itself. And there is the gentleman Mutu Mara Chetti, not him, Mutu Mara Chetti, who did a lot of trade within the Riau and Melaka area. His name is quite clearly mentioned in the Dutch records. Right? And Balthasar Bott, who was the governor, he also had made comments and referred to the Chitties in Melaka during that time. This is of course a picture of one of the most famous people in the community, Devanayaga, who of course is the founder and starter of the Sri Vinayaga. Now during the British times, it was completely different because they had a very different way of doing things. They brought in their administrators, they opened up the trade into their people, they came to open up businesses, they came later on to open up the estates and so on. So a lot of trade was given over to them. And the local people did much smaller trades in this country here. So not very important during this period. And then, but they created other opportunities. They created opportunities in the government service, in the administration, because they brought in a full administration and expanded that government system here. And then they had schools as well, which were very open schools. They were not community-driven schools, they were government schools, they were broader education. And over the years, they also brought in British examinations and so on. So the opportunity for education was available to everybody in Melaka, and of course there were Chitties who took advantage of this. And when Singapore was started, there were a lot of Chitties who went across over to Singapore to work because there was a bigger administration being set up, and of course the British were, as you know, concentrating more on Singapore than in Melaka in those days. So that in Singapore today there's quite an active society, and Colonel Kalastri was here last week to speak on the Singapore Chitty community as well. So there they have got people like you. And there is also a book released by one Velupillay, the Chitty Melaka story or something like that. His own story also is that when they moved from Melaka during the Japanese times in Singapore, they came back and finally found there was occupation available in Singapore, and so resettled back in Singapore again. So like him, there were so many people who had moved from here to over there. Yeah. Then we come to the Japanese times. They were not exactly unknown people during the you were not exactly unknown people during the Japanese times. And Melaka, of course, the concentration was Kuala Lumpur straight to Singapore. Melaka was off course, so it was not so affected by direct war itself. But when the Japanese were actually in occupation, the whole economy suffered, and Melaka also had to suffer. People had to move to the countryside, but Gajah Berang was countryside during those days already. So you had the advantage, and people were already having farms and their own food produce, from what I read and understand. So they were quite well off. But I think more importantly, from the picture you see a B.S. Naika, many of them joined the volunteer corps, and became decorated soldiers during the Japanese time itself. So the Chitty community has done and contributed toward the war effort against the Japanese. So, to summarize the whole situation, let's go through it once again. Political power changes. Started off with the Portuguese time, allowing business as usual, but they controlled it. The Dutch created a monopoly and controlled everything, which means there was a loss of the control of trade by the Chitty community during the time. The British concentrated more on Singapore, giving less opportunities for the Chitties, except in the field of education. And so the fortunes of the Chitty community changed over the years as they moved to other forms and other professions, or other skills, should I say. So now the question, as many of you also say, never mind the past. Never mind the history of the past. But I think it is important for you to know who you were, because now you have to reassess and look forward to bringing the entire community on again. So the present and the future are in your hands as such. And I think, as somebody said, don't look to others to help you. You have to help one another. That's my opinion. That's our opinion as outsiders to you. Alright? Now, how do we then have a look at these things? What are the things that have assisted you? The point about yourself is you have to be very proud of yourself, knowing your past, knowing your capabilities, knowing the opportunities you have, knowing the programs that the trustees have in mind to help the community come up. Yeah. And your village is not unrecognized. There has been efforts by the government, and since the year 2000, some say 2002, I don't know which is which, but I take the year 2000, when you have become a heritage village within Melaka state itself. So that itself is a recognition. So there have been people who have been working to push the community to get a recognition that it is not just a small group of people around town. Right? And it goes even further. When Melaka itself had World Heritage status since 2008, I was told that it is very unfortunate for Gajah Berang because you are just outside that line which borders or marks the area of the Melaka Heritage City. It's a pity they did not push a little bit further, and then you would have also been part of the Melaka Heritage Zone. But remember one thing, heritage status requires you to preserve your community, your architecture, and your community in this place. So you have to work towards that preservation, and hopefully maybe in time we can push for an inclusion within the overall Melaka Heritage City status as well. Now recently, just recently in December 1st, what has happened is the Dondang Sayang has been listed as an intangible cultural heritage. Tangible is something you can touch. Intangible is something that takes place you cannot touch. Your food is intangible culture. Your dancing is intangible culture. Your folk songs, your melodies, Dondang Sayang is intangible culture. It is part of you, although you cannot feel it and touch it, but you live the culture. And that has been recognized by UNESCO, which recognizes these things. Now, UNESCO recognizes food, dancing, folklore, music of various communities around the world. And what is it that makes it to get onto the representative list as an intangible asset? Well, intangible cultural heritage, it must have two things. Firstly, it must be something that is coming from the past and handed down from generation to generation, and it is still alive and practiced. Dondang Sayang, right? Now you must also have government assistance in many cases, where some countries they change the law to preserve this kind of cultures, or the government encourages it by holding shows, supporting these kind of events, and so on and so forth. Does Dondang Sayang get assistance from Melaka government for any of the events? No, but you are still practicing it. You are still practicing here in Melaka, incidentally. Dondang Sayang, not as much as before, but still got. I understand in Singapore they have, during the weddings and events, there is a Dondang Sayang event during the time. So, Malaysia anyway has been recognized because they clearly stated it is practiced, it is written clearly, it is practiced by the Chitties, the Malays, and the Bawat community. So it is something that you are part of as well. So these are there are people who recognize achievements by the Chitty community in itself, right? So then moving on, you have to promote yourself, and I think the most important factor over and over is to improve the community in many, many ways. We earlier heard this morning discussions about education, which of course is the first thing. Remember, in the British times, from the early days of skilled labor, skilled and professional work, education was available. People took the education, were able to go to Singapore and find a different opportunity over there, which in a way alleviates your society in some ways. in many ways, in fact. So the same thing is encouraged over here, as we have heard so much this morning. Education is a key factor, and the first thing to bring everybody up. Second thing, of course, is the encouragement to get the young generation to be involved in the culture. I see during the Megame, I've attended 2 years and I've seen pictures in the past. Same people involved, right? That's fine, but a new set of people should be coming up soon enough to take over from the older group of people. Yeah? So the main point, that's my view as an outsider. Right? Plenty of hope, plenty of scope, but you have to do it yourself. Encourage yourself. You've got a good committee, a good group of trustees who are moving things along. And it's a step by step. We cannot do this overnight. Huh? You have to have a generation that starts today to bring it forward, but at least something gets to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Right. Any, yeah, certainly. Questions, please? No questions. Thank you. Yes.
Unfortunately, my whole community is not here.
Well, yes, that's true.
That's very sad. Because this struggle has been going on, I think, since 1992 onwards, where we get all the community together, the trustees are all know, when we get all this documented, we go house to house. And I think my niece was a young graduate, just about to graduate.
She's still young.
Yeah, she was young, so we go for it, and today she's continuing the legacy.
That's good.
And I'm very, very happy because why? As far as I'm concerned, not that we can't achieve within that, what you say, it cannot be a year, 2 or 5 years or 10 years. But gradually, we have to improve. But the very important thing is, I think the community must change the way of thinking, the attitude towards the culture. And I think they also must support the current management. Whether it is good or not good, you have to give your views. And I think this group of management, they are very open-minded. And I want to thank you again for opening up a bigger scope to the rest of my community who are here. And I hope, please, give support to the new management to make sure that we continue the legacy of the Chitties community for the next one. Thank you very much.
Even changing management, the usual thing is you shouldn't change 100%.
Yeah.
You should change only a part of it because there is a continuous work that is going on from one community to the other. If we change it completely, you lose the continuity and you also have new ideas coming in that override the program, so nothing gets finished in other words. So you should have a change part of the committee so that the older committee remains for a while to continue the work. The new committee that comes in gets to understand that, and then you roll over people. Right? This is why in many organizations they say 1 quarter will change every year, and so on and so forth. So it goes on. As to your attendance today, never mind, because this is the first forum you're having. But is that right?
Yeah.
It's not here. And then this is the first one, huh? So this is the start. You see, as people get to know, and I see they're slowly coming in, they will then start to realize these kind of events are very useful events. You promote the events as well, not just the community. Yeah? Promote it in schools, tell the people, pass it around to everybody and say we are having this big event and come along. And best of all, it's free. It's free, isn't it? Okay, so again, as I said, step by step. Yes, Rana.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dira.
Yes, Rana.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Thanks for your very informative speech. And also, I'd like to thank you and your museum volunteers, right, that you wrote books for Chitties of Melaka. I think that is one of your initiatives to introduce Melaka Chetti to the Malaysians who actually don't know us. So my question is, besides the book, what are the other steps that volunteers, museum volunteers actually you have in mind to further promote the Chitties?
Well, if I can straight away answer, we have a training program for museum guides. Right? A training program is 4 months, which covers a lot of subjects. And one of the subjects we have is Cedric, whom you all know very well, to speak on the Babas and Nyonyas. Now, since last year, we have now included an hour talk on the Melaka Chitties as well, which follows his talk. So he talks about Baba Nyonyas, then I follow through with the Melaka Chitties. So every group of about 25 to 30 people are coming to know about this Chitty community. So that now when they guide in a particular gallery, there is a nice big display of Babas and Nyanyas, and only a few lines about the Melaka Chitties. So now we can speak more about the Melaka Chitties as well. Right? They can emphasize on that. There are other displays that talk generally about Indian culture, dressings and so on, but still not enough focus on the word Melaka Chitty. So hopefully that is a start. Right? Yeah, sorry, Karen, you want to add something?
Also, as part of the training, we also visit Melaka. So after the training, we do bring our trainees to Melaka for a visit. And as part of the visit, we also come to the Chitty Museum here, just to bring awareness to
Yes.
Just to expand on what my uncle said earlier, it was back in the 1990s where I was a young graduate and jobless. So my uncle said, hey, do something useful. Okay, we're going to collect all this material from all over the place in Kampong, and I wanted to sit down and write because this is what we had to say. So I must say at that time, I didn't have a clue what they were trying to do. I said, listen here, we do this day in, day out. Why do you want to document this? Just because I'm here, I don't have a job, it doesn't mean that I have to sit and do this. But nonetheless, I did it. I'm glad I did this. And where's the document now?
Yeah.
I hope it's here somewhere.
There, somewhere there.
But I think.
But you have to try and recover the document.
Yes.
That's right, yes, and it comes from a view that goes back 92,
Exactly.
which is even less of a knowledge than even people know of the Chitties today.
And I think what I would like to flag or point out to, you mentioned earlier that there are Chitty communities in Singapore and in KL. And I think what's important is to turn those connections into opportunities. Because those are like our arms, the branches of a tree. And we need to needs to be maintained, it needs to thrive, it needs to flourish for future generations. So it would be good if we could get funding, Singapore, KL, we tap on those because that's where your federal government is. So we need to knock on doors and to make sure that we're able to get the source of funding.
Yes, that's a very good point. In fact, I will go further as to say that I think Selangor is very safe because the president of the Selangor Chetti Association is also one of the trustees or not? Oh yes, So yes, I think that's very important. What you say is you really have to spread. But again, you got into Singapore, most of the people go into Selangor or Kuala Lumpur, so you start there and then you move along and slowly develop. Remember the key point, you can't rush it, right?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to ask or a little further clarify on the efforts done by the volunteers of the museum, right? Museum volunteers on the awareness of the Melaka Chetti, which is a session that you are doing at the moment, right? Is there a plan to have one of our locals to actually lead that session? Probably learn something from you.
Because last year was the first year, and it was done in a pretty short time. So we will expand on that further. It's a very good point. Thanks for reminding us of that. And of course, in many ways, we should also count on somebody who is living in Kuala Lumpur, and I see him sitting there, so please get ready to smile. Oh, shut up for that matter. Yes, sir.
Someone wants to say something?
No, it's your turn.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Jiga. That was very interesting. Seeing it from someone who's made an in-depth study and helped write a book on the Melaka Chitties. And I think the book was good, more detailed than ever done before. Yeah. Maybe what I'd like to say is I like your idea about moving people in slowly into the committee so that you have a continuity of projects that you have undertaken. It's a very wise idea, something we have talked about and thinking that that's the best way to move forward. But until you live in this community, you realize that sometimes things are far from easy, not so easy. And we would welcome that the two groups come together and work together having one mindset, which is to promote this village and move our community forward. But most times, when someone is in the committee who's not like-minded, all they're doing is putting hurdles and making it very hard for the rest to move forward. So sometimes we take 2 steps forward, 1 step back all the time. So yes, if people will change, have a different mindset, be willing, you know, your intention is sincere and you want to move the community forward, that's the way to go.
True, that's right. I must also share some experience. When my younger days I was in the local development committee in my area, and that is a community after all. And we had exactly the same situation as you had, where we get people voted in, and then there's another group who didn't get voted in. There are these difficulties, but we just pushed along, and as long as people saw that we were providing the service, they gave the support to that particular committee, or my committee at the time, not mine, I was part of the committee. And then the others start to realize that, you know, the support goes to the people who actually work. And so that changed, you know, and then you will get a few people that realizing and coming and joining us. And another situation is when we had another situation, 2 or 3 of us in the committee implemented some ideas. People didn't like it. They said, oh, it's not necessary and so on. But after about a year, we found that they were actually doing it because they realized it was a good thing to do. Yeah, it wasn't my idea particularly, but I was part of it. And so it helped. So people still see it. So as I said earlier, it is not an overnight change. It will be a proper change. If everybody does something correctly, the committee does something correctly, in time people see and realize, you know, they will come to realize what it is like. Yeah? So be patient, but work. That's the best thing I can say.
I think I just would like to expand a little bit, if I know somebody else wants to talk. Just to expand a little bit from Santa said, I think what's missing in the community today is a long-term plan that everybody agrees on. Maybe a 30-year plan, 50-year plan. I mean, without this vision of the mission, then you're just going, you know, you're moving forward blindly, right? So people come and go. In corporate organizations, you have succession plans. You groom the young leaders, you know, in many different ways to get to a certain level. But it's all based on that plan. And I'm willing to help the community and the committee, actually, to build this plan. With all that we've talked about during this week, Melaka in fact has done a tremendous job promoting and making or creating awareness. And people like yourself, Jega, who's written books on us, Mr. K. Narayanasamy as well, who's launched his books last year. I mean, this is all creating awareness for the community. Now, I think what's also important is putting all of this into an action plan. This action plan is going to be crucial because it's going to have to take the community forward. We've seen this morning unity, education, great leadership, etc., as part of criteria that we need to maintain in the community. To preserve our legacy and our culture. But I think what's missing today is maybe we can start with a short-term plan and then continue on with the long-term plan. I think that's going to be key for the community survival. And I think it should be open to everybody who wants to help us, internally and externally, to gain the knowledge and the experience and expertise in many different areas.
Yeah, that's really very good. Okay, in that case, once again, thank you very much for your attention. I hope I've been able to help. Oh, you have a question? Right, as I said, thanks very much. And I hope I've been able to give you a reasonable idea of what the outside things of the Melaka Chetti. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lega, for the lovely talk, and thank you all for coming here on Sunday afternoon for fireside. It's cooler here, right? So, and you are being fed with some nice talk from Mr. Lega. One more. I want to call upon Sheikh Hamid to present a special bouquet from MIF. Thank you all. And we have one more, today we have one more talk or dance by Jennifer.
Who's Jennifer?
Yeah.
Oh,
And she will
Jennifer.
top it up. And then after that we have the announcement of our photograph
Winner.
competition. And what's the first prize?
Camera what?
This one
Hey, no.
The camera.
T-shirt
Not
lah.
this lah. Camera.
Okay, camera and then second prize.